that's all you did. I often hear that in the research game, and it is a story that is told all the time. And it doesn't matter whether you are somebody's direct supervisor, it doesn't matter whether somebody is, you know, a manager. The whole game is the story of people looking at other people and saying, that's all you did. And I think about that a lot because when I see those exact same people try to do the same thing, I often see that they underperform the same way that you underperform or the same way that somebody else underperforms. When you are put in the same position that somebody else is in, you almost always see the same performance. And I think about this, that we have this belief that we have to perform at these certain levels, but in actuality, real life, real how things actually work are performing at a much lower level. I often think that we play in completely different games. And if people are put in the same situation, the same position, that they will perform in the same sort of way that somebody else has. And I want you to sort of remember that before you start judging yourself or before you start thinking poorly of yourself, that in fact, you're probably pretty remarkable. And it doesn't matter what position that you actually are in, but you probably are remarkable. And I always think about that in my head, that I start thinking like, man, I have not accomplished anything. I haven't done anything. Look at what I've done. And then I take stock of just how hard it actually is. I take stock and I think about, man, it was really, really difficult. And I see somebody else that would be at the same position that I would be at. And I realize that they struggle too. They can't figure it out. And for whatever reason, maybe they get lucky breaks. I don't know, right? Like maybe they think differently and their brain is wired in a slightly different way and it allows them to get a little bit ahead. But isn't that a lucky break? Isn't that in of itself that they had a lucky break? I think maybe that they have resources. They're at an institution that allows them to get a lot more money than myself or somebody else. And I think, well, isn't that a lucky break, right? Why did they actually get into that particular location when somebody else could not get into that particular location? Often there's all these lucky breaks that happen, and there's all these moments that allow you to get a little bit more ahead, but you're not doing anything any different than somebody else. And I think about that all the time, where we actually do accomplish a lot. So this gives me a lot more forgiveness of myself. I start thinking like, I can't accomplish anything. I'm stupid. Like I feel terrible. I feel like all those negative emotions that you probably feel. And then I look at what I've actually done. Like actually done. Right? When you look at what you've actually done, you realize like, hey, this is actually pretty amazing. Right? Like that you've been able to do this thing. So for example, right? Like I think of myself and I look at my research productivity, and I am not research productive if you were to sort of look at this, right? And you were to sort of classify my research productivity to many, many different people in terms of who I look at and, my aspirants. But then I look at what I've actually accomplished. I'm like, wait a minute, I did this, I actually put in the work to do this. And when I see people do the exact same thing, when they try to sit down and do this thing, they can't do it. It's too difficult for them. And I recalibrate how I think about things. So not only do I think about myself in a little bit better of a way, and I realize like, hey, wait a minute, I've been able to do all of these wonderful things that somebody else has not been able to do because they give up, or it's too challenging for them. Or I also think about giving other people a lot more grace, giving people a ton of grace now that is almost unreasonable, where I'm just like, I understand. I'm very sympathetic that it takes a lot of time. And it's very difficult to do. And I often extend far too much grace because it is so difficult. And I do realize that many people cannot do things the same extent that I can or somebody else can. I want you to sort of remember that when somebody or you start thinking, is that all you did? Or somebody else says that to you, it usually means that they have not experienced the same things that you have experienced. They haven't gone through the same things that you have gone through. They do not know. And even in your head, if you start thinking, is that all I did? I want you to start thinking about all of the things that you actually did do. Like, actually list them out, talk about them, think about them. And when you actually think about, that's all I did, you will be amazed with actually what you actually did. And it's often far more of what you actually did. And I want you to just reflect on that. How friggin' awesome that you actually are. And the more that you reflect on that, the more you realize, like, hey, I can get back up and do this, right? And there is very little that's there that you should not be proud about. So I want you to think about this, right? So you might be thinking, all I did is I sat and watched TV all day, or I played video games all day. That is a skill that requires a lot of work. I know that sounds silly, but it does require a lot of work. It's hard to do that. So all you have to do is just shift your perspective and think about something else in that particular direction that allows you to get to someplace else, whatever that is. So if you sit and watch TV all day, well, that's wonderful. Figure out how to do something at the same time that allows you to do something that would be quote unquote productive, whatever that is. Or start thinking about how your mind changed because you actually sat and watched TV the whole day. And that, hey, you actually feel good because you watch TV all day. I think we really need to start changing our perspective and feeling better about ourselves inside rather than thinking about, I am not that good. I am terrible. All of those negative emotions that you have, or that's all I did. I want you to actually look at what you did. And usually those activities that you did, they were really important in your life. And they helped you get back up and do something that you probably couldn't have done without those activities. So before you start judging yourself or judging other people, if that's all you did, I want you to take a step back and think, man, that is amazing with all that stuff that you actually did.